Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Brigadier Denise Beekes. I'm the standby duty officer for Gauteng province, and this is Colonel Mokhali from Communication Service in Gauteng. Just to bring you an update of the incident that happened this morning. First of all, from the South African Police Services side, we can confirm that there was a shooting incident this morning at the home of the well-known Paralympic athlete Oscar Pistorius. At this stage, we can confirm that a young woman, a 30-year-old woman, did die on the scene of gunshot wounds. A 26-year-old man has been arrested and has been charged with murder. At this stage, he's on his way to a visit to the district surgeon for a medical examination, and he'll be appearing in the Pretoria Magistrates Court at 2 o'clock this afternoon. We have also taken cognizance of the media reports during the course of the morning of an alleged break-in, or that the young lady was allegedly mistaken to be a burglar. Obviously, our forensic investigation is still ongoing. We're not sure where this report came from. It definitely didn't come from South African Police Service. Our detectives have been on the scene, our forensic investigators have been on the scene, and the investigation is ongoing. I don't know if there's any questions at this stage.
Hey there, hope everyone's well and looking forward to a brand new year. Okay, so we find ourselves in a new playlist. We've looked a lot at the Idaho 4 case, and we're going to be looking at the STEENKAMP Pistorius case. And this case is in a very different phase of its life cycle compared to Idaho 4. But another huge difference, which I think is interesting, is that the STEENKAMP Pistorius case was never about who did or didn't do it. So it's also a very complicated case, but it is completely about intent. So if you're starting with the 5 whiskeys and 1 hotel method, and we want to establish all of these questions, herein lies the headache of Idaho 4, right? There's a lot of fragmented information. Some people do and don't trust it. Everything is still ongoing, and it's a little bit of chaos. While the STEENKAMP Pistorius case is almost completely focused on the why. And there's sub-questions that follow from this, did he mean to kill her? If so, again, why? If not, did he mean to kill anybody at all? So when he said in court, I made a mistake, was the mistake regarding the action or the target thereof? And the reason this is really important is because I'm sure many of you know he's going to be released in only a few days. And a lot of people, including June Steenkamp, believe that he's still not being honest about what actually happened. So this is just a introductory video to what I'm hoping is going to be a very extensive playlist. And we're going to take it really slowly, and we're going to scrutinize everything at our disposal. I want to start by taking the words of Oscar Pistorius and looking at his own words. I think that is a good starting point. So I've studied the transcript of his examination and cross-examination, but I also don't want to, jump right in there without looking at the statement from his bail application, because it's concise and it's a better way of sort of easing into things and not really throwing everyone in the deep end. Now, in terms of this document that we're going to go through, I've listened to some podcasts and I've read some analysis, and a lot of people seem to be very preoccupied with how much Oscar Pistorius appears to think of himself. And he mentions a couple of things in this document. I want to take that with a pinch of salt. I don't want to overreact, because this is a bail application. So I can see what these people mean. In part, I do agree. I happen to think Oscar Pistorius does think a lot of himself. But I don't think that that is the aim of these comments, because this is a bail application. We always have to look at the target or the motive of what we're analyzing. And I do think that what he's trying to say by referencing his success is that he is highly recognizable and that he would not be a very effective flight risk. You know, I haven't really seen him sit in an interview about this incident and talk about his success. Also in court, he didn't until he was asked to do so, so context matters. When it comes to this document, I think that the indiscrepancies in his version of events is far more interesting. Okay, so here we have it. We have Oscar Pistorius's bail application statement. This statement was referenced quite a bit at trial because there were inconsistencies, which we're going to look at in due course. And I'm going to skip to the circumstances and just read through it once, and then we're going to come back to it and sort of pull it apart slowly. All right, so according to Oscar Pistorius, on the 13th of February 2013, Reva would have gone out with friends and I with my friends. Reva then called me and asked that we rather spend the evening at home. I agreed, and we were content to have a quiet dinner together at home. By 10 p.m. on 13 February 2013, we were in our bedroom. She was doing her yoga exercises and I was in bed watching television. My prosthetic legs were off. We were deeply in love and I could not be happier. I know she felt the same way. She had given me a present for Valentine's Day, but asked me only to open it the next day. After Reva finished her exercises, she got into bed and we both fell asleep. I am acutely aware of violent crime being committed by intruders entering homes with a view to commit crime, including violent crime. I have received death threats before. I have been a victim of violence and of burglaries before. For that reason, I kept my firearm, a 9mm Parabellum, under my bed when I went to bed at night. During the early morning hours of 14 February 2013, I woke up, went onto the balcony to bring the fan in and closed the sliding doors, the blinds and the curtains. I heard a noise in the bathroom and realized that someone was in the bathroom. I felt a sense of terror rushing over me. There are no burglar bars across the bathroom window, and I knew that contractors had worked at my house and left the ladders outside. Although I did not have my prosthetic legs on, I have mobility on my stumps. I believed that somebody had entered my house. I was too scared to switch a light on. I grabbed my 9mm pistol from under my bed. On my way to the bathroom, I screamed words to the effect for him, them, to get out of my house and for Reva to phone the police. It was pitch dark in the bedroom, and I thought that Reva was in bed. I noticed that the bathroom window was open. I realized that the intruders were in the toilet because the toilet door was closed and I did not see anyone in the bathroom. I heard movement inside the toilet. The toilet is inside the bathroom and has a separate door. It filled me with horror and fear of an intruder or intruders being inside the toilet. I thought he or they must have entered through the unprotected window. As I did not have my prosthetic legs on, I felt extremely vulnerable. I knew I had to protect Reva and myself. I believed that when the intruders came out of the toilet, we would be in grave danger. I felt trapped as my bedroom door was locked and I have limited mobility on my stumps. I fired shots at the toilet door and shouted to Reva to phone the police. She did not respond and I moved backwards out of the bathroom, keeping my eyes on the bathroom entrance. Everything was pitch dark in the bedroom and I was still too scared to switch a light on. Reva was not responding. When I reached the bed, I realized Reva was not in bed. That is when it dawned on me that it could have been Reva who was in the toilet. I returned to the bathroom calling her name. I tried to open the toilet door, but it was locked. I rushed back to the bedroom and opened the sliding door, exiting onto the balcony and screamed for help. I put on my prosthetic legs ran back to the bathroom, and tried to kick the toilet door open. I think I must have turned on the lights. I went back into the bedroom and grabbed my cricket bat to bash the toilet door. A panel or panels broke off, and I found the key on the floor and unlocked and opened the door. Riva was slumped over, but alive. I battled to get her out of the toilet and pulled her into the bathroom. I phoned Johan Stander, who was involved in the administration of the estate, and asked him to phone the ambulance. I phoned Netcare and asked for help. I went downstairs to open the front door. I returned to the bathroom and picked Riva up, as I had been told not to wait for the paramedics, but to take her to hospital. I carried her downstairs in order to take her to the hospital. On my way down, Stander arrived. A doctor who lives in the complex also arrived. Downstairs, I tried to render the assistance to Riva that I could, but she died in my arms. I am absolutely mortified by the events and the devastating loss of my beloved Riva. With the benefit of hindsight, I believe that Riva went to the toilet when I went out on the balcony to bring the fan in. I cannot bear to think of the suffering I have caused her and her family, knowing how much she was loved. I also know that the events of that tragic night were, as I have described them, and that in due course I have no doubt the police and expert investigators will bear this out. So, okay. Of course, I would like to hear your comments and observations on this as we go along. But this is what I've noticed initially. Okay, so first I noted the R. This is not a huge deal, but Oscar Pistorius in person had never usually let Riva Steenkamp penetrate that boundary between what was his and what was hers. It was usually my room, my bed, etc. And I mean, let's be honest, Oscar Pistorius did not write this. He's even said so. Somebody from his legal team would have drafted it for him to sign. It's not hugely misleading on its own, but you will see where I'm going with it as we start seeing other things like at home. This was a very early relationship. And you'll see that Riva Steenkamp had an overnight bag that she kept on a couch in the bedroom. So she didn't have a shelf or a cupboard closet. They weren't at that stage yet. And it's not my intention to undermine their relationship, but I do think that the intimacy is being blown out of proportion. Funnily enough, I don't actually recall Oscar Pistorius having done that verbally, but in this document, I think that this is an interesting approach. We have this. This is screaming out. We were deeply in love, and I could not be happier. I know she felt the same way. She had given me a present for Valentine's Day, but asked me only to open it the next day. Now, I don't have a problem with this claim. I think it's inevitable that Oscar Pistorius would try and say this. What I find uncomfortable about it is the placement. This may have made more sense to start as a kind of background to the parties involved and their relationship. What's very off-putting for me about these sentences is that they have been inserted in an association with a very specific part of that evening's timeline. It's not being stated as a matter of fact or as background information. It's actually showing up at the very specific point of contention in this timeline, and that is the point of whether or not there was an argument that was starting up between these two individuals. So, this claims could have stood firm on their own, would have been fine, but it gets my back up that it's being used to prop up a narrative instead of just standing for itself. And the way this is done, to me, reads like a poor attempt at a script. You can actually visualize it, right? It's a happy home, there's an Olympic champion watching TV, and a beautiful supermodel doing yoga. It's almost Valentine's Day, domestic bliss, deeply in love, all of that, okay? That's what the location of these sentences have done. Not what they themselves have done, but where they're put, to me, is odd. And throughout this playlist, we are going to go and look at text messages between them. Between Oscar Pistorius and Reeva Steenkamp. Now, some of these messages are problematic and some of them are very loving. The defense noted that the texts are about 90% loving and only about 10% argumentative. And we're going to look at that. We're going to look into whether the proportion of this discrepancy is any more important than the fact that there is a discrepancy to begin with, especially this early in the relationship, Is it significant that they were swinging between highs and lows 3 months in? Or is it significant that the lows weren't a lot? We're going to get to that. They hadn't been together long. So it's hard to characterize this relationship because a lot of what you're seeing, whether this relationship was good or bad, a lot of what you're seeing is the early stages of that good and bad, and not its essence and what it would have become eventually. But I have highlighted watching TV because we're going to look at some pictures from the room at some point, and we're going to go back and look at all the remotes and see what's laying where, try and figure out if all of that makes sense. Alright, we have here, we both fell asleep. I hate this. It comes up so much. It reminds me of Dylan Mortensen from the Idaho 4 case. We'll hear later that Oscar Pistorius later spoke to Reeva Steenkamp when he got up. So he hasn't really explained why he's assuming that she was asleep while he was asleep, unless he saw her fall asleep. But, we'll get into that too, because another point of contention in this case is whether the lights were on or off. He said they were off later, so the question would be, did Reeva Steenkamp turn them off and then go to sleep? Same for the TV. If she did that, why would she not bring in the fans? It's important to note that a neighbor saw them on. And the reason this matters so much is because a crucial claim that Oscar Pistorius made was that he couldn't see. So now we have this. I am acutely aware of violent crime being committed by intruders entering homes with a view to commit crime, including violent crime. I have received death threats before. I have also been a victim of violence and of burglaries before. For that reason, I kept my firearm, a 9mm parabellum, under my bed when I went to bed at night. Now, people have asked me about this, kind of wanting to know, is this a real South African reality? And I actually, I don't like talking about myself and my experiences too much in these videos, because I like to keep my glasses clean, if that makes sense. But I suppose what I can say is that I am a South African. I can't speak for Oscar Pistorius' lived experience of his life or his country. I don't know what it feels like to be him. But yes, I am a born and raised South African who doesn't live in a secure compound. Okay, I live on a normal street, in a normal area, by all accounts an average area. I personally have never felt the need to sleep with my firearm next to my bed on a regular basis. I have been affected by crime, like most people here. I have been held at gunpoint. It does happen. Based on my experiences and my reality, what I see him explaining is very extreme. Too extreme. And it's not completely fair to inflict the life of me or the average South African on him and say, this is how it is. I say it's extreme by my standards. I'm not rich and famous, okay? And that might change things, I don't know what it feels like for everybody to know who you are and for everybody to want some of what you have. I couldn't imagine that. I also have both my legs. I'm about the same height as him when he's on his stumps, a little bit taller, but the point is that I have my balance. I can kick and run. If I approach danger, I probably feel more comfortable that I can get away. So this subject is an extremely unique person. Oscar Pistorius is a very unique person. Okay? It's not a straightforward assessment to compare him to another person. But just because it is tricky to compare him to another person doesn't mean that we can't compare Oscar Pistorius to Oscar Pistorius. And at the time of this incident, he wasn't new to guns. And he wasn't an isolated person. So what I mean is that he'd had people around in that particular home. So a previous girlfriend, Samantha Taylor, a domestic staff member, a friend who had stayed in the guest room sometime before the incident, contractors outside with ladders, and even noisy household appliances who, I'm sorry to say this, but are all probably very lucky to be alive. Okay? They made it out alive from his space. I can't speak for what that means yet, but we need to look into it, because if you look at this washing machine thing, this is an example of the kind of control that he may actually be capable of in the face of a perceived threat. Now granted, he was probably on his legs, and the washing machine can't close or lock a door. But if he didn't remember turning that machine on, who did? Was it the domestic assistant? Was it the house guest? They can all lock doors. So he did have people in his space. And he did previously have access to firearms. Now, yes, there are prior incidents, but the extent of which we know, he didn't kill anyone. So I would like to know if there was some kind of recent occurrence that may have intensified the security concern. Maybe. This washing machine thing seemed to resolve itself. On this night, he took the most extreme measure he possibly could. Now, about these priors, there are at least 2 gun-related incidents in his history that have, I'm going to stress this, nothing to do with security. These 2 are just some of the incidents that we know about, and they are strictly amusement-based for him. Okay? The reward for him there is amusement. I am not necessarily anti-gun, but I believe that that object ought to be respected as the life-altering and life-ending thing that it is. If a person's interest in guns is even partially amusement-based or image-based, then they must get a toy gun and go play with their toys somewhere else. Alright? Because I understand that there's a security component, but Oscar Pistorius' relationship with guns was not solely safety related, in my opinion. Alright? There was no reason, safety-wise, for him to shoot through the sunroof of a moving car. There wasn't. I mean, was there an intruder on the roof now? No. So, in terms of his history, I don't know if it does more harm or good to highlight these things and to emphasize his need for a gun because of security concerns. I don't know if that's all it was for him. Okay, so here I have emphasized where it says phone the police. And I think that this was really a mistake. You know, like whoever wrote this saw it in a movie, because, you know, I don't like cliches, and this is about 3 of them in this document, and maybe in another country it wouldn't be, but South Africans, like Oscar Pistorius, do not say this, okay? You'll hear push a panic button, fetch the dogs, stuff like that. People here in South Africa, in Oscar Pistorius's world, they don't say that. They don't. And I want to be clear, I don't have anything against the police in South Africa. I think that they do get an unfairly bad rap sometimes. Some of them are good and admirable people, but they are generally very under-resourced. And some might say that if an intruder in South Africa heard the words "call the police," they would say, "Oh, okay, we got time." It doesn't happen. Not if there is estate security, motion sensors, alarm beams, panic buttons, dogs, all kinds of stuff like that. And if you think I'm being unreasonable and you want confirmation of this, then look at Oscar Pistorius' own behavior after the incident. He phoned the estate administration. So his goal was to get to security. He didn't follow his own advice and call the police in an emergency. Okay, here we have the toilet door was closed. So here he was saying it was closed, but in court he took it even further than that, and he said that he heard it slam. And this matters for intent, because if this person were really an intruder, they would not really be showing any signs of being confrontational at this point. I mean, if you're comparing fight or flight, this perceived intruder was showing signs of flight. You know, he said that he thought they were going to come out and attack him. The point what I'm making here is that they were exiting his space. Okay? They were not facing him. Okay, now we have unprotected window. This is a problem for me. It's misleading because he's saying unprotected, meaning it did not have burglar bars. This window, be it without burglar bars, is in an estate with beams and private security and probably electric fence. I would argue that this window, like all of Oscar Pistorius' windows, is very well protected, burglar bar or not. Okay, now we've talked about this mobility changing to limited mobility. And I understand why it may seem like I'm overreacting by this change, but this is something that cannot be a flexible standard in this scenario. There is footage of him on his stumps in court, and he is wobbly. But if you focus on his actions by his account of this particular night, he did a fair amount of what he did on his stumps. Okay, he walked down a hallway with no light on his stumps, with a weapon in one hand, and one fully healthy shoulder. Okay, so he had a shoulder injury. So limited eyesight and issues with 3 out of his 4 appendicular limbs, and a gun in one hand. And in this condition, he fired 4 shots into a door and then walked backwards. And do I even need to say that he was now, at this point, keeping his eyes on a door despite the fact that he couldn't see much a moment ago? Now he's using his eyes. Okay. So, walking backwards and staring at a door with limited mobility in the dark, with a gun in one hand, I don't know. After this point, he said that he started rushing around, possibly still in the dark. This thing of him being too scared to switch on a light, he has maintained the whole time. I wouldn't have had a problem with that either. I would have been happy to accept that particular claim if he were quiet, by his account, when all of this was happening. So I can't see why he would be too scared to switch on a light unless he was saying that he wanted to remain discreet. I don't see what the sense would be of using darkness to your advantage while screaming for somebody to call the police. It's like he was concerned about these intruders seeing him, but it didn't bother him if they heard him. For me, that's a discrepancy. Okay. Slumped over but alive. He makes no mention of how he knew that. Okay, did he check her pulse? What actually happened here? Unfortunately, I'm not convinced that she was alive. Okay, so over here we have him explaining how he tried to take Reeva Steenkamp out of the cubicle and into the bathroom. And I'd like to keep that in mind because he hasn't really explained why he thinks he should do that. Why does he want to move her? Had it occurred to him that that could do further harm? You know, he indicates that later on here he indicates that he wanted to move her because somebody at Netcare 911 advised that he take her to the hospital himself. Now, whether that conversation with Netcare 911 was real or not, it doesn't matter because it hadn't happened yet by the way this paragraph is structured when he wanted to take her out of the cubicle and into the bathroom. Over here, he's explaining that he picked her up because he was told to take her to the hospital, but he's not justifying the decision to pull her out into the bathroom. So what was that about? Was it about space? It's not easy to understand. But look, I mean, as we go through the court transcripts, we may be able to become more clear on that. We'll see. I'm not sure about this. And as well, over the course of this playlist, I'll do some research on if and why the ambulance would make this recommendation. I don't know if Oscar Pistorius is qualified in any of this. I don't know if he has the correct licenses, PDP. I don't know. I'm not saying that this wasn't the recommendation, but I would be interested to know why. Okay, so here he notes that he subsequently believed that Reeva Steenkamp went to the toilet when he went onto the balcony to collect the fan. This onto is going to become quite complicated, you'll see. But with this situation around Reeva Steenkamp going to use the toilet, the defense made the argument that Reeva Steenkamp's empty bladder supported Oscar Pistorius' version that she went to the bathroom while he was on or at the balcony, since there was no urine on the scene. Now, the problem for me is, I know this sounds weird, but there was no toilet paper in the bowl, and Reeva Steenkamp was already dressed and standing because one of the bullets penetrated her hip through her shorts. Alright. So, Oscar Pistorius was relying a lot on his sense of hearing that night. That's what we've read here. And in terms of his story, I believe that had he heard something like a flush of the toilet, he would have possibly thought, what on earth is this intruder doing in there? And at that point, it may have occurred to him that it was Reeva Steenkamp. Now, it's not a given that there was a flush, but he did claim in court that he was startled when he fired the weapon by a sound that gave him the impression that somebody was about to come out of the cubicle and possibly approach him. So I don't know what was happening there. As far as I understand, she hadn't had time to unlock the door. But what's important is that if this was as straightforward and as simple as her going to the bathroom to relieve herself, I wonder what signs there would have been of that. What sounds? Is it normal that she locked the door? I don't know. Maybe she was shy. I don't know. Is it normal that she took her phone with? I don't know. That's not something I can tell you. But what is normal around this act of going to relieve yourself? There's a couple of things. One of them are sounds that we'll have to talk about. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and please do let me know what you think. Bye.